Welcome to the first podcast of Boring AF Politics, where we are going to avoid everything that's interesting. So, no partisan pearl clutching, no hair pulling, no road rage, just two political science professors. And yep, that's what we are talking about politics. It's right there in the name, Boring AF. I'm Dave Hayes, Dr. Hayes, Dave, and I got my colleague, Dr. Rich Ledet. Rich, say hi.
How's it going, Dave? How's it going, audience?
We hope there will soon be our sleepers. Right? We got to come up with a name for the audience, but let's go by way of introduction. Let's just get right into it, because the first thing we want to talk about is what we do uh, as professors teaching politics. And I always think the elephant in the classroom is what do we do? Do we indoctrinate, right? And so here we have a meme I got, liberal colleges where they teach how to hate America but not how to spell. So I guess the first thing we need to do is explain to everyone why we hate America and are pushing a liberal woke agenda. Oh wait, we don't hate America. Rich, weren't you in the army?
I was. Weren't you in the army?
I was in the army. You were better in the army than I was. Like, you got shot at. I just did push-ups. But
No. I did my fair share of push-ups. Yeah.
well, didn't we all?
Great. Yeah. I mean, how can we hate him? Why would we have volunteered to put on a uniform and serve if we hate our country?
And I feel like we still serve. I
Yeah.
feel that when I left the army, I said to, because there's always this problem, especially when it was peacetime. Why are you leaving? Why aren't you staying in? Lack of commitment. And I said, well, I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to teach people. So I've always felt like I'm serving the country. And, teaching at Troy, we have a lot of military students. And Troy is in Alabama. And oh, by the way, notice the disclaimer. Right? Troy has nothing to do with this. This is my podcast. Blame me, not Rich, not Troy.
My opinions, not yours.
But so, Rich, where did you go to school? First of all, let's give some bona fides here. Where'd you get your PhD?
I finished my PhD at the University of Notre Dame. Not exactly known for being a liberal stronghold on higher education.
Well, it is kind of a Yankee school, though.
Yeah, that gets me in trouble sometimes.
Well, I
Uh,
got mine at University of Rochester, so that's Yankee as the day is long.
yeah, you're further north, man.
And you were in the Army when?
So I was on active duty from 95 till the middle of 97, and then I joined the Louisiana National Guard, and I was in the Guard while I was finishing my undergraduate work at Louisiana State University. I was in the Guard till 2000, and then I was in active reserves until about, I think 2005, fall of 2005. It was my first semester of grad school at Notre Dame when I received my discharge papers in the mail. When I finished my dissertation in 2011, I started training to do field research as an Army civilian. So I spent um, 7 months, I believe, in Afghanistan in 2012 doing field research um, for the Army.
I went to graduate school. I got out of the Army, went to graduate school. I was there for the first Gulf War. I was actually in a National Guard unit. And the day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait was when we started our annual training down here. I live in Fayetteville. You're at Troy in Alabama. I'm at Fayetteville because I was hired by Troy to teach at Fort Bragg
Yeah.
in the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School. We did that for 6 years under contract, and I've been teaching online here in Fayetteville since, now Fort Liberty. Let's get serious about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Where there is this very deep suspicion about college professors and about the institution, about the academy, we would say, perhaps grounded in the fact that, let's be honest, students go into college, they come out thinking very differently,
Yeah.
and they vote very differently. How do you feel we deal with teaching politics? Because our problem is we actually have to teach politics. We're
Yeah.
not teaching, biology or how do we deal with it? How good a job do you think we do dealing with being respectful of our students?
Well,
Look,
how good of a job we do, I think, is we do. You know, I've observed myself in class. You know, I do record myself at times to critique myself. I've observed my peers. You know, as part of my job is administrative duty. So I've observed, and I think we do fairly well. But also from the student's perspective, I'm hearing, you know, we're doing what we want to do. I mean, you know, from the student's perspective, at least looking in at the quality of student we produce based on their ability to perform in law school mainly is, I think we're doing quite well at teaching our students to think critically, right? Because that is essentially what we're doing. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other colleges or it doesn't happen at Troy University or it doesn't happen in other disciplines, right? We are transmitting the body of knowledge that we have about politics to our students, but we're also teaching our students how to learn about politics. And that I think is what's often missing from this conversation, or the arguments that college professors are liberalizing all their students and teaching them to be, you know, good, fine Marxists and voting certain ways. That's not what we do. You know, we're not here to overthrow the capitalist system. You know, capitalism supports our democracy and vice versa, for example.
mhm.
And some of our ideas about democracy come from some of our ideas about capitalism. You know, let's have some competition, and out of that competition, we're supposed to be able to figure out what the best course of action might be. You know, so I see what we do as really supporting the country, supporting democracy, supporting the free markets, but we teach people to think critically. You know, you got to teach people to be good critical consumers so they're making smart choices. You can extend that to the realm of politics. We're teaching our students how to be good consumers of information, political information in particular, so that hopefully they can make better decisions and that ultimately our country, our state governments, our local governments can thrive because we're injecting smarter ideas into into the political system. And we do that by, you know, we do it in the classroom, but citizens do that by having conversations about politics on a daily basis. You know, the choices that we make in the classroom are intentional because we want students to be better equipped to think critically about the political world.
And I definitely want them to tend to carry signs more like this.
Mhm.
You know, a big Lebowski fan, but also I think too, you know, there is a thing that we teach people to be critical of ideas, and we teach them to question. And it is inevitable when you go into a school that the ideas you walk in with will be challenged. They, you know, if you want to go to college and have none of your pre-existing beliefs challenged, why are you going to
Yeah,
college?
that's not why we're here.
That's not why we're here. And the thing is though, I think it's inevitable that students have kind of a backlash, or you know, they start questioning things. We start telling them to be and this is my whole thing is I don't indoctrinate anyone because I don't know what the answer is,
Yeah.
right? I have some ideas about what's going on, and our discipline is about testing those ideas. But you know, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. That's your opinion. And to be honest, I have to say one reason I'm putting this whole effort with this podcast together is throughout my career, whenever an election came along, I went to ground. You know, because in the atmosphere of an election, I'm always concerned about, you know, respecting their opinion. You know, and I mean, maybe I'm joking about the Big Lebowski there, but you know, I need to respect that opinion, and I don't want to tread on it. And the thing is, though, I freaking teach politics, right? And so
Yeah.
this year I'm like, look, I'm old. My life is behind me now. I'm gonna, you know,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna retire soon, and I'm like, honestly, I feel like I need to try something different. So, with that in mind, that's what we're about. That's what the elephant in the room is. And so, let's talk about. In these podcasts and the videos that I'm going to do in between, we're going to try to talk about the 2024 election that's unfolding. And on Tuesday, March 5th, we are going to have, or if you're watching this later, we've already had Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is in the primary. We have all of these states. These are the states
Mhm.
that are involved in it. 30 to 33%, depending on which party, of the delegates available are being chosen on Tuesday.
That's an
And
interesting list. I see quite a spread across the country.
yep, and we have just a whole bunch of and my own state, North Carolina, and oh joy, I'm getting campaign ads on the TV now. When we talk about Super Tuesday as political scientists, and here's the thing: is this is interesting in that I think I know who's going to win on both sides in all of these races.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, I don't think there is any state there where Biden isn't going to win the Democratic primary and Trump isn't going to win. Right? So we know the answer. And so we have an election where we, in fact, know the answer already. And so the question is, what should we be looking for? What is there to know about this? So what do you think we should be looking for on Super Tuesday in the results?
Well, as it turns out, I'm going to look at first turnout
Turnout.
because the thing is, we're talking about primary here. So I'm looking to see who turns out across the country. How many people aren't going to show up to participate anyway because they think the outcome's predetermined, which to a great extent it is, right? But also maybe they don't have time, and they may not also have the interest, right? I mean,
Right.
let's be real. Like politics could be boring, AF, right? So it doesn't have to be this conflictual thing all the time. But there's some people who are just not involved. Period. Right.
Yeah.
The people who do tend to vote in primaries tend to be the activists,
Right.
as it turns out. So I'm looking to see if there's any deviation from the norm in terms of turnout. If the turnout bumps up a little bit, I'm interested to see. I'm always interested to see a demographic breakdown because, in particular, I'm always looking to see if the youngest generation is paying attention, right? And if they're paying attention enough to know know how to register to vote, right? That's a hurdle that people have to overcome anyway, right?
Hmm.
Are they committed to a specific party or candidate? So I'm also looking to see if the I'm really looking to see how much support Nikki Haley gets, because that to me is an indicator of the anti-MAGA Republican vote. I'm really looking to see if there's that anti-Trump voice in the Republican Party. And again, just just in the interest of learning more about the political system and about elections, that's my interest there.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and so I think we got a couple things. One, we have the turnout.
Mhm.
And again, one thing I would like to do with this podcast is pose questions and then subsequently, either in short videos or in our next episode,
Yeah.
maybe both, come back and say, "Hey, we talked about it. What happened?" Right. So we got homework,
Yeah.
and maybe you'll help me out with that, or maybe you'll just leave it to me. I don't know. The thing is, though, that we want to look at that, and so we want to. And here's the thing: that this isn't going to happen on the news, right?
No.
They are going to mention turnout, and I think what we need to do is look at turnout and then compare it to previous primaries,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
say, all right, what does it? And we're going to have to pick because last there wasn't a Republican primary in 2020, right? And there was a Democratic primary. Oh, by the way, in 2020 during on Super Tuesday, uh, Biden lost 4 states to Bernie Sanders.
I do remember that being an issue. Now
Yeah,
that you bring it
and
up.
and but so there was a competition going on, and there was that. But we want to look at turnout and compare it to different elections. We want to look at demographics, see young
Yeah.
break it out. And I think how young people vote is very critical for the election.
What other
Uh,
demographic variables do you think we might we might see some fluctuation in? I brought up age.
Age is there. I'm I think clearly we in the South for Democrats we want to look at African American turnout,
Mhm.
right? Because that has been something that has been mentioned in the punditry that black support for Trump is growing, weak for Biden. Let's see what the turnout looks like as an indicator there. I
And that could
think
help us test some of that. A lot of that punditry stuff is just to make more news. It's not even really.
right.
I don't put a lot of weight in that, but that would allow us to kind of test that talking point.
Right, and we want to. And again, honestly, as political scientists, I keep coming back. We're professional. We are devout agnostics, right?
Yeah.
We don't. We don't. I mean, I don't want to say we don't believe in anything. Personally, we believe in things, but as scientists, we have an idea. Even if I think that this theory, this explanation of how the world works is so great, I have to test it and try to see whether. And so we always test hypotheses, right? So we want to test, is this true? And so we will test that. And by the way, this goes beyond fact checking. Fact checking is whether a simple statement is factual. We're trying to see whether a conjecture about how causality works, how one
Yeah.
thing affects another. So we're looking for a relationship and a test of it. We're digging deeper. We're going into the matrix. I always say, we're kind of like Keanu Reeves when he finally perceives the stream of
Yeah.
code
I
behind everything, right?
I,
That's where
I
we're
use
trying to get.
that. I use that in class all the time.
And you know
Like,
how old that, has an 18-year-old seen that movie? Are we just so
well,
old?
I asked that question. I'm like, you guys seen The
Yeah,
Matrix, right? And yeah, there's some heads going, no, no. But for the most part, yeah. When I mentioned Neo's like moment when he just
right.
sees ones and zeros, I'm like, you know. But I also say like, put on your political science lab coat, right? Put on your political science gloves. Put on your political science lenses. Leave your partisanship at the door, right?
Yeah.
Leave like I'm not saying your religion doesn't matter, but just maybe change those lenses a little bit, so we can come in here and put on our political science protective suit of armor and just observe the world and see, you know, how some of our ideas about the world stand up to scrutiny or not. Because if you got a good idea, and this kind of builds on something you were saying in the introduction, if you got a
Yeah.
good idea, it should withstand scrutiny.
So I think we can look at these things. We'll try to compare um, turnout. I think we can look at Haley's percentages and talk about that. And so those are some things because that, by the way, that is what I don't know how much we want to work on that because I think that is what a lot of people are going to seize on,
Yeah.
and we're going to see a lot of, because we want to do things that they aren't doing in the mainstream press because we're boring, right?
Let's
They're going
think
to do what's
about
exciting. We're going to do what's boring.
let's be really boring and let's also include the Hispanic vote.
Oh yes,
I
that's
want
not
to do
that
that
boring.
too.
That's not that boring. I could come up with more coma-inducing boredom than that, for sure. That's Super Tuesday. That's what's happening. And in general, in all of this, as we're in primary season, right? We are our near and dear, everyone's favorite topic, polling. And so, what are the problems about using prime polls now to try to see what's going to happen in November?
Man, that's another really really boring thing to talk about because I've actually taught a class on survey research methodology and
Yeah.
it's super boring. But I think if you appreciate what a good poll does, it just gives you a snapshot, right?
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, your poll is only as good as the questions you're asking and the ability of the respondents to give you answers. But there's something else there. It's has to do with those respondents. Is how do you find them? You know, I'm
Mm.
not convinced that we're getting an accurate snapshot of the general electorate whenever we do, polling this early on, right? Because a lot of people are simply hanging out. Now, polling firms, good polling firms, and a lot of universities do this work. They have ways to kind of build up that sample and make that sample representative. But I'll go back to also it's like the quality of the information that you're getting from people. I'm not convinced that, going back to something I discussed earlier, who participates in primaries? It's the activists, right?
Mm,
And it's the activists that are really paying attention right now. But
mm,
those activists aren't the general public. We got a long way to go, so anything can happen.
mm,
Um, hey, I just saw on one of my news feeds, and I need to go and check the accuracy of this. I think a container ship, or maybe it was an oil tanker, got sunk in the Red Sea because of Houthi rebels. You know, that kind of thing could impact inflation, and that could be a shock to the system that drives down support for Biden. You know, um, Donald Trump could say something really crazy and only get more support because that kind of seems to be something I see. You
stay
know,
boring.
but
Stay
yeah. Oh,
boring.
okay. My bad. My bad.
Stay
But yeah.
boring.
But who's
Stay
paying
on target.
attention? Who's paying attention right now?
Yeah.
And what do they actually know? So we pick up the phone and start to answer polling questions. Across the country, are people really engaged? The activists might be. So I'm not. I think people are basing their poll answers on either pre-existing identities and allegiances to either party, or a set of facts that you know could things could change.
Yeah.
So I'm just not really putting a lot of weight in early polling in general, um, because I'm not sure who's answering those poll questions in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that we've got a good representative sample of the population right now.
Well, and by that you mean in terms of, I mean, in terms of who's going to go vote.
But also in terms of the information that people have, right? I just don't know if people who are answering polling questions right now are really paying that much attention.
Right.
I
So
think you're
it's not
just kind of,
representative of how they'll be thinking
yeah.
for
It's
later.
it's not just representative of, like, in terms of demographics, but representative of what
Yeah.
people are actually thinking. You
Well,
know,
and that's why I say, because you were kind of close to some of the complaints about polling I worry about when they say that they're biased and that people go out and what and I think what we're getting at is we as political scientists know that, look, we're not going to question that Quinnipiac is getting a random sample of 1,400 people from the United States.
Mhm.
We're not suggesting that. What we're suggesting is, what does that tell you? Are you getting especially about the future,
Yeah,
right? Is this representative of that? Are It's certainly not going to be representative of people voting in primaries because, as you say, they're the activists. They're a subset of the population. You're getting people who answer the phone or respond to whatever online thing you've got,
yeah,
which is different from the people who decide to get off their butt and go out and vote. You know,
yeah,
um, and so when it comes to the later thing, there's that question of, well, we have this temporal separation, right? And what are they thinking? And I think some of the things I know. I look at these polls now. It is interesting to me that, uh, and in fact, I was just looking at the latest uh, Quinnipiac, I think. Uh,
yeah.
that poll,
Quinnipiac,
the Q guys,
big
not
long word.
QAnon, different Q.
Starts with a Q.
It does start with a Q. The thing
Different
though is,
Q.
stay boring, stay boring. Um, the thing is though that uh, the undecideds are, when they ask people if the election was held now, would you vote for Trump or Biden? Right. That's generally the question they're asking. Sometimes they'll throw in other candidates like Robert Kennedy, but um, and I think part of it is they don't have a likely voter filter,
Yeah,
right? They're asking, their filter is, are you registered to vote? And so they're at least, they are saying, look, we only want to talk to voters, but that's all voters. And so that question of, are you going to get off your butt and go vote, which is huge in America, right? Because we have some of the lowest turnout amongst democracies.
Yes,
The
we do.
question of turnout, and in fact, in a lot of ways, political parties win not by convincing people that they want to vote for them, but by getting out the vote, by turning out, having that thing. They know that's a huge part of the ground game. So, as we get closer to the election, they'll have likely voter filters that will try to figure out, how likely you are to go
Yeah,
vote. And so right now we don't have that. The other thing is, what I see, you mentioned there could be exogenous shocks, right? That's the fancy term for it. Outside shocks
that's
like
boring.
the Houthis and, those sorts of things.
That
Um,
sounds boring. An exogenous shock sounds boring.
oh, wait till I start talking about ontological security, baby. Oh, wait till we go there because we have a license to use stupid long
That's
words.
right. That's right. We do.
We do. It comes with our PhD.
We're
I got it in
pros.
my wallet. Uh, the point though is though that's an outside shock. Trump saying something stupid on the campaign trail is endogenous to the campaign, I suppose. But I also look at it as, hey, the campaign is going to bring so many things. Like right now, you hit someone with, would you vote for Trump or Biden? You are asking for a comparison of the two, right? And it's kind of just, if it was held today, which guy would you vote for? When you get down to, okay, when you go vote, who are you going to vote for? When we're in a campaign, I really feel like um, what what will change is the issues that are brought up, right? How much do people associate the economy as the key issue in the election? How much do people how much does the campaign associate abortion, which is really getting away from being boring, but if abortion is linked and if people start thinking about the vote not as a vote for Biden or for Trump, but as a vote over reproductive rights,
Yeah.
or a vote over illegal immigration. And so the framing of issues is going to develop in the conventions and in the general election. So all of that has yet to occur. And so I guess my big point is we both have reasons. We're both questioning the value of these polls without rejecting polling as a methodology,
That's
which
right.
is so important because people are really down on polls since 2016.
Yeah.
And
And
I think they're overly down on them.
yeah, it's such a good point though, Dave, because and I will take the listener back to what you said about using a poll, using a snapshot in time now to predict what's going to happen later. And that I think is like people's expectations of polls are just, that's why the class that I teach on the topic is so boring, you know, because I'm really, it's a class like minimizing, like you really need to manage your expectations of what this particular research methodology can actually do. Now, that being said, it has a lot of value, right? It
Mhm.
helps us put essentially, put our fingers on the pulse of the public, but we have to be careful about how we use the information that those polls are provided. In addition to being careful about who did the poll, who's interpreting the poll, but we have to manage our own expectations about what this poll is useful for. And again, to take it back to the demographic breakdown in some of these polls, I'm really using that to look at trends. I want to look at trend lines, right?
Mhm.
And I use it to compare group A to group B to group C. And there's a few specific things that I look. I mean, one thing that I focused on in my studies is religion, right? And religion is a multifaceted phenomenon, but I'm particularly interested in the way certain aspects of religion, like the type of church you go to, how does that relate or not to the way you vote? So I'm looking to see trend lines like over
Mhm.
time, like are different religious groups, do they seem to be shifting one way or another, you know but I use that point in time in the history, what's already happened. That helps me compare something, right? But I don't know if I'm going to put a lot of stock in, something went up. Like I need more than 2 points.
Yeah.
So I want anybody listening to remember. Like there are good polls, there are bad polls, there are polls in between, but we really need to manage our expectations when we start thinking about what these polls can actually tell us.
Yeah.
And I go circling back to we should not use them to predict the future.
Even and Nate Silver does that.
Yeah,
But I would say that, and that is something that eventually, as we get closer and people for, part of the things I want to avoid doing, I want to avoid talking about controversies, fact checking. We're not into fact checking, um, because other people are doing it.
other
Don't
people do it, and
other do
they could do it better than us. They got more
but
resources.
right, and I don't want to get into controversies. I don't want to get into forecasting, but I do want to get into pulling apart forecasting because I'm very interested in forecasting. I teach a course in it,
Yeah,
and as we get closer to it, Nate Silver's 538 thing is going to come out, and people will say, "Oh, he didn't predict Trump." I'm like, "Well, he predicted a 40% chance Trump would win, and nobody else did." So he
yeah,
actually was blinking amber, and actually before the election came out and said, "Y'all are over certain about this." He did actually put that out there in the ether and was just pilloried for
yeah,
doing it. The idea of probabilistic forecasts. Wow, talk about boring, but also a little mind blowing when you start thinking in terms of probabilities.
yeah.
And so,
Well, in the grand scheme of things, a handful of votes in just a handful of states would have swung that election in Hillary Clinton's favor. And it's also some of the states that her campaign didn't spend a lot of time on because it just
uh,
assumed it was going to win. Michigan, you know.
oh,
So
it was. I remember looking back after it, going, the f happened here, and I don't think it was Michigan. I think it was Wisconsin, where I looked at the state polling, and they had like two polls in the state, and so all of the estimates based off of the polling were off of two
too.
polls. And now we don't have that problem anymore because people are now spending a lot of money on state polling after that. But we did have this problem of there just weren't that many polls,
Yeah, not a lot of data points to go off of. You know.
and so, yeah, they had nothing to go on because a lot of that was that newspapers who used to spend money, state level newspapers that used to do and spend the money to do the polling, had closed and they weren't there to do it anymore. And so um, other organizations are now, I believe, stepping in to fill that gap. But that's the kind of, but all right, that's boring.
That's
But
boring.
that's also the kind of thing I think we can bring to look at whatever Nate Silver and the 538 people, whatever Harry Enton is doing, you know,
Let me throw this wrench in the machine too. And
please, please F
maybe
my
this is
day up.
boring too. Nate Silver can't predict, no matter how much data he has, whether or not there's going to be some electoral college shenanigans.
Oh,
And our
we're
polls
going
can't
there.
tell us that, right? So, and what I'm suggesting is, again, this is going back to, please don't use polls to try to predict the future. Now, I can say with the based upon what I see and hear and read and think is going to happen, I suspect there will be some electoral college shenanigans. There were before, right? Um, I guess I shouldn't mention January 6th because that's not. I mean, that's
That's not
but hey, what I am suggesting, there's no poll that's going to tell you that, right?
right. And
So
um,
as political
and that's
scientists, we can look at the electoral college and say, wow, people might vote and people might support, but it's happened before several times, even just recent elections where that popular vote does not reflect the winner. So there's no poll that's going to tell us that, right? We actually need to step back and say there's something else. There's another source of information we need to go to. So I'm saying this just to say polling's not the only source of data
yeah.
on these issues.
And so, like I say, as I don't want to get into ourselves forecasting, but I do think we should be consumers, like you said, and you said early on, it's about teaching people to be consumers of data, of po- and consumers of information, and critics of
Yeah.
uh, of punditry, with the understanding that we are boring academics who have strange ideas. We use the term liberal to refer to conservative economic theory. When we use the term liberal, we are talking dead white guys in wigs,
Yeah. Yeah.
not what y'all mean. We're talking Locke and uh, uh, Adam Smith, uh,
Mhm.
and the thing though is that when we say critical, it doesn't mean negative,
And it's
right?
not criticizing
You
either.
could be a movie critic and like a movie,
Mhm.
and what it is looking at it and going, okay, what's going on here? And what's good and in fact saying what's good about something, saying that something is, having a positive view of it. Yes, the data supports this point of view. That's being critical,
Mhm.
right? And so I think if we get people to be critical of pundits, um that doesn't mean rejecting punditry. That means cross-examining what they say.
Yeah.
And
I really like that movie critic analogy though, because a movie critic can like the screenplay but not like the actors delivering the lines, right? The movie critic can say, you know what? This was shot like the cinematography on this film is excellent, but the music sucks, you know?
yeah.
So and that's I think that's a really good analogy, and I think I'm going to use that in class, and I might I
Well,
might I might give you a citation for that.
Well, feel free, but anyone who's driving, be aware this is about to be comma-inducingly boring. But there's the term. What you're talking about is analysis, right? And I always say that analysis, the it means literally to break something down in its parts, and so to recognize, like you say, the screenplay, to understand what part of a movie cinematography is. You can watch a movie and never really appreciate it, but then you start thinking about how it's made and what goes into it. And this is that's analysis, right? Breaking it down into its parts and considering it, right? So yes, mind-numbingly boring, but at the same time I feel that's an important thing, and that's where we want to go, right, with what we're talking about. So all right, well, thank you, Rich. For it's a Saturday morning. Super Tuesday is coming up. Hopefully, I'll edit this and take most of the stupid stuff we said out. And I don't know, we have too much to go there, but and I'll be posting it either. I might try to get it up on Monday so it's there the day before. But to look for any, to be honest, probably not anyone still listening at this point in the video. But if you're here, thank you. Uh, and this is normally where I'm supposed to say subscribe, like, and follow. Yeah, do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But we are gonna. I think what we want to do is after it have some. I'm going to try to do some short vids. Cut this out, and slice and dice, put it out, and answer some of these questions maybe even before we meet again. But in a couple of weeks, we'll try to come back and look at where things are. Maybe talk more about polling, and who knows? Maybe have somebody else join us.
Maybe we can get our colleagues to, you know, help us triangulate here and
And they
find,
can get a T-shirt.
yeah, find something that kind of resembles the empirical reality.
Rich, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank anyone who has watched any little bit of this. And uh, this is Dave Hayes, Rich Ledet for Boring AF Politics.
See you later.